Hi, this is Kim with Scholarly Pursuits. So, today's segment, we're going to talk about what to do if you're running late for an interview. I mean, it could happen to any of us, depending on where you live. If you live in a big city with traffic, one of the things I would suggest is to scope out the interview location before the interview. So maybe the day before, a week before, drive from your home or wherever you're going to be leaving from the day of the interview. Drive to the interview location. Even get out, check out the parking, go into the building, find the floor. Because sometimes once you even get into the building, depending on how big the building is, you kind of lose some time just trying to navigate the office space, right? Especially if it's one of these large corporations or one of these companies that take up multiple blocks, or it could be confusing, especially when you're already probably a little maybe anxious or stressed about the interview itself, especially if we really want this job, right? So if you're running late for an interview, traffic, weather, the kids, didn't cooperate that day. You had child care and the child care fell through, so you had to go to plan B. There could be many reasons why you might be running late. And most people understand that something like this could happen sometime. So the first thing you want to do is contact the employer, contact the person being interviewed by. In order to do that, you're going to need to know some contact information. So when the interview is being scheduled, you'll want to get the contact information of the person who's scheduling the interview, so that one, if you're running late, you can let them know. Two, if you get kind of lost or not sure where you're going, or there's something else you need to communicate to the interviewer at the last minute or kind of short notice, you'll have that contact information in advance. Okay, so most people understand that life happens. Now, in saying that, I'm not saying that that'll mean that there'll be an opportunity for you to still come even late, because a lot of times when supervisors or managers or leaders schedule interviews, they usually schedule them one back to back to back. Especially if it's a panel interview, they're going to have to juggle and work with multiple schedules to get all the players at the same location at the same time, right? So everybody's schedules are not always synced perfectly. So you'll want to contact the interviewer first to let them know that you're running late, and then you'll want to know if it's okay for you to still come, right? Because they have a lot of time, maybe an hour, usually 45 minutes to an hour for the interview. So if you get there 30 minutes late, now we only have 15 minutes if it was a 45-minute interview, or 30 minutes if it's a hour interview. So you'll want to make that connection with the person that scheduled the interview, and you'll want to make sure that you have contact information in the event that something happens and you're running late for that interview. So that's number one, making sure you have the information for the contact person in advance in case something happens, and then letting the interviewer know, number two, that you're running late. That's what you're going to do first and second. Now, once you've notified the interviewer and they have said, yeah, come on, we can still accommodate you, let us know when you get here, that's the best case scenario. But it may be a scenario where they're like, well, we can't really accommodate you if you're running late because we have somebody else scheduled. We have interviews scheduled one after the other. And if that happens, just ask if there's another day that will work for the interviewer and the interview panel. And here's the reality. There may be another day and there may not be another day. That may be the only opportunity that you have to interview. And here's why. Sometimes organizations have rules on how quickly positions have to be filled. Sometimes the supervisor, the manager may be going to be out for several weeks. So they've made these time slots available for the interviewers, and they don't really have other time slots that might be available to accommodate someone who has to cancel at the last minute or is running late. It may be that now the interviewer or the panel or somebody on the interview panel has a question in mind. Is this a person that runs late normally? Is this something that they always have an excuse as to why they can't be there? Because remember, you're selling yourself for this interview. And if you're running late, then that may raise a question to the interview. Is this something I'm going to have to deal with day in and day out? My manager comes to me, needs something, the employee is not there because they always typically run late. Then that might run into disciplinary issues. It may raise that question. So it's an unfortunate situation, Most people know that these things can happen, and they just say, come in when you can. We'll put you at the end of the day. We'll accommodate you some other way because they've selected you as a person that of interest that they want to interview. So hopefully they'll go that second mile to make sure you're able to get that interview in. That's an in-person interview. Now, one of the ways you can run late on a virtual or MS Team interview, and I have to smile during this, is because technology. The most of us, unless you're like an IT person, we have run into, especially during this pandemic and post-pandemic time, we have run into technology issues. It could be a storm and your whole computer goes out. It could be any number of reasons why there might be some kind of issue with an online or a virtual or audio interview. So if that happens to you, again, you're going to take that first step that we talked about before and make sure you have a way to contact that person if something does happen with your technology. You're going to want to make sure that you sign in early enough to make sure that any of those technological glitches, I can't hear, I can't see, your workspace or your interview space is not quite what you want, and the blurred background is not working. You want to give yourself time to work out all those kind of challenges before that online, that virtual, that audio interview begins. I just want to encourage you that if you're running late, don't beat yourself up. If the unexpected happens and you're on the highway and there's this pile up, or if the weather makes visibility hard, or if there's something going on at home and you have kids or neighbors or friends or family and something comes up, the first thing you want to do is let the interviewer know, right, what's going on. You probably want to have a good explanation when you do that, right? There are some things that are personal in nature and you just may not be able to share. And then, of course, I always say pray about it, because God is able to do exceedingly above all that we could ever hope, right? All may not be lost. And then if all that doesn't work out in your favor, just remember, there are other jobs out there. There'll be other opportunities out there. But if this happens to you, just know, let the interviewer know, and take it from there. This is Kim with Scholarly Pursuits, and I just want to thank you so much for joining me today on my channel as we've talked about what to do if you're running late for an interview. And actually, this could be applied to any sort of audition if you're in the arts, or if you're applying for a scholarship and you have an interview with the scholarship, or you try to get into certain schools or professional schools or things like that. There are any number of times when you might have to audition or interview for different things. And so this can be applied to all those. Thank you so much for joining me. If this content was something that you found valuable, I ask that you'll like, share, and subscribe. And please feel free to comment with any stories that you may have had, or people that you have known, or even if you're a supervisor and you've had experiences, or manager or leader or director, and what you found worked for your organization. Thank you so much. This is Kim Upchurch.